In the year 1552, the winds over the Volga carried the sound of war drums. Across the endless plains, banners snapped in the cold air as armored riders prepared for battle. At their head stood a ruler whose name would echo through history, Ivan IV of Russia, later known as Ivan the Terrible. For centuries before Ivan's reign, Russia had lived in the shadow of the Mongol Empire. In the 13th century, the armies of the Golden Horde swept across the Russian principalities, burning cities and demanding tribute. Russian princes were forced to kneel before Mongol Khans. Entire generations grew up under foreign domination. But by the 1500s, the once mighty Golden Horde had fractured. In its place stood several Tatar Khanates, powerful steppe states that carried on the traditions of Mongol cavalry warfare. Among them, the most dangerous to Moscow was the Kazan Khanate. Kazan stood along the Volga River, a wealthy trading hub and a symbol of Tatar power. From its territory, mounted raiders struck Russian villages, capturing prisoners and livestock. The raids were swift and terrifying. Entire communities disappeared overnight. When Ivan became Tsar in 1547, he was determined to end this threat once and for all. He was young, only 16 when crowned, but he carried enormous ambition. Ivan did not merely want to defend Moscow, he wanted to break the legacy of Mongol dominance forever. The Gathering Storm. By 1552, Ivan had assembled one of the largest armies Russia had ever seen. Chroniclers spoke of tens of thousands of soldiers marching eastward. Infantry, cavalry, foreign mercenaries, engineers, and most importantly, artillery. Cannons had changed warfare forever. The Tatar Khanates were masters of cavalry. Their warriors rode fast horses, loosed arrows with deadly accuracy, and vanished before enemies could respond. But artillery could shatter walls. It could break cities. Ivan understood this. As his army advanced toward Kazan, Tatar horsemen shadowed them. Skirmishes erupted across the countryside. Swift riders attacked supply lines. Russian scouts reported large mounted forces gathering. Veterans of the steppe, hardened by generations of warfare. Some later legends would claim that Ivan faced 120,000 Mongol horsemen. The real numbers are debated, but what is certain is this: the Tatars were formidable. They were not a fading tribe. They were experienced fighters defending their homeland. The Siege of Kazan. When Ivan's forces reached Kazan, they surrounded the city. Massive wooden siege towers rose above the plain. Cannons were dragged into position. Engineers dug trenches and tunnels beneath the walls. Inside the city, defenders prepared for a desperate stand. Tatar cavalry units attempted to break the siege from outside, launching attacks against Russian positions. Battles flared beyond the walls, brutal clashes of steel and horseflesh. For weeks, cannon fire thundered day and night. The walls of Kazan began to crack. Each explosion shook the earth. Smoke filled the sky. Finally, after sustained bombardment and the detonation of mines beneath the defenses, Russian troops stormed the city. What followed was chaos. Street fighting erupted. Defenders resisted fiercely. According to chronicles, thousands died in the assault. Some accounts describe rivers running red, though such imagery often reflects the dramatic language of medieval writers. The city fell. The fall of Kazan was not simply a military victory. It was a psychological earthquake. For the first time in centuries, a Russian ruler had decisively crushed one of the successor states of the Mongol Empire. The symbolic weight of that victory cannot be overstated. Some later stories exaggerated the numbers, claiming tens of thousands, even 120,000. Enemy horsemen were slaughtered. While historians doubt such figures, there is no question that the campaign devastated Tatar resistance in the region. Survivors were captured, displaced, or forced into submission. Mosques were destroyed or converted. Orthodox churches were erected. Russian settlers moved into the territory. The Volga River, once a frontier, became a Russian artery. Ivan's victory at Kazan opened the door to further expansion. Soon after, Russian forces advanced against the Astrakhan Khanate. The steppe frontier shifted farther and farther east. Within decades, explorers and Cossacks would push into Siberia. What began as a campaign against Tatar raiders transformed Russia into an expanding empire. The balance of power on the Eurasian steppe changed permanently. But victory did not soften Ivan's rule. Over time, he became increasingly paranoid. He created the Oprichnina, a state within a state, enforcing loyalty through terror. Nobles were executed, cities were punished. Even his own family suffered under his rage. His nickname, the Terrible, comes from the Russian word Grozny, meaning formidable or fearsome. To his enemies, he was a destroyer. To supporters, he was a ruler who broke centuries of humiliation. The conquest of Kazan became central to his legend, proof that Russia had finally avenged its past. Did Ivan massacre 120,000 Mongol horsemen in one single battle? Historical evidence suggests that number is likely exaggerated. Medieval chroniclers often inflated figures to magnify glory. What we do know is that thousands died. Armies were crushed and a powerful Khanate fell. The legend grew over centuries, transforming a brutal siege into an almost mythic slaughter of an enormous cavalry force. Yet even without exaggeration, the truth is powerful enough. Ivan did not just defeat an army, he ended an era. The Mongol shadow that had loomed over Russia since the 1200s was finally broken. The conquerors had become the conquered, and from the ashes of Kazan rose a new power, one that would stretch from Europe to the Pacific. As the smoke cleared over Kazan in 1552, Ivan stood victorious. The Volga flowed quietly once more. The steppe winds carried no more raiding banners toward Moscow. Instead, they carried the beginning of something new, an empire in the making. And whether the number was 10,000 or 120,000, one truth remains. That campaign marked the moment Russia stepped out of the Mongol shadow and into its imperial future.